2 years ago, I stayed at an Airbnb on the outskirts of Flagstaff, Arizona, a small town surrounded by vast pine forests. I just wanted a quiet weekend getaway to escape the daily grind. The house seemed perfect, a wooden cabin with a beautiful view, far from the crowds. The owner provided self-check-in instructions, and I arrived there in the late afternoon. After placing my bags inside, I explored the property. The cabin had a back porch overlooking the forest, the perfect spot to enjoy the fresh air. As I sat in a rocking chair, I noticed someone walking among the trees. From that distance, he looked like a middle-aged man wearing a thick jacket, moving slowly. I figured he was probably a local resident or a guest from another property. As the sun began to set, I went inside to cook dinner. After eating, I watched a movie while enjoying a cup of tea. Then, just as the film reached its climax, the doorbell rang. I was startled. I wasn't expecting anyone in such a remote place. Hesitantly, I walked to the door and peeked through the window. Standing there was the same man I had seen in the forest earlier. I cracked the door open slightly. "Can I help you?" He smiled politely and said, "I'm lost. I was out for an evening walk, but now I can't find my way back. Can you help me?" There was something off about the way he spoke. His tone was too relaxed for someone who was supposedly lost. Still, I tried to be polite. "Hold on, let me grab my phone and check the map." I closed the door and picked up my phone from the couch, but when I returned and opened the door, the man was gone. I stepped outside and looked around. There was no one in the yard or on the trail leading into the forest. A strange unease crept over me, but I tried to shake it off. I made sure the door was locked and returned to the couch. I stayed up later than usual, trying to calm myself down before eventually falling asleep. The next morning, I went out to the back porch to enjoy my coffee. But then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The man was in the forest again, walking along the same path with the same slow pace as the day before. My heart pounded. This didn't make sense. If he had really been lost yesterday, why was he walking the exact same path again? I went back inside and called a friend, telling them what had happened. We laughed a little, trying to lighten the mood. But at that very moment, the doorbell rang again. I froze. Still holding my phone, I slowly walked to the door and peeked outside. The man was standing there, wearing the same smile. "I'm lost," he said, in the exact same tone as yesterday. "Can you help me find my way?" A chill ran down my spine. It felt like I was reliving the previous night. My hands trembled as I quickly shut the door. I told my friend, who immediately urged me to leave the cabin. I agreed. I packed my things as fast as I could and rushed out, but as I opened the door to put my bags in the car, I saw something that nearly made my legs give out. The man was inside the cabin. He was standing behind the living room window, staring at me with a blank expression. I didn't think twice. I threw my bags into the car, jumped into the driver's seat, and sped away as fast as I could. When I got home, I immediately called the Airbnb host to report what had happened, but their response made my skin crawl even more. "Oh, I'm sorry about that. This isn't the first time a guest has experienced something like this." I tried to ask more questions, but the host just apologized again and hung up. I never found out who that man was or how he got inside the cabin so quickly. But one thing I know for sure, I will never go back to that place again. I was on a business trip to Austin, Texas, and chose to stay at an Airbnb in Cedar Park. I prefer Airbnbs over hotels because they feel more homey, and the house I picked seemed perfect. A single-story home with a modern design, located in a quiet neighborhood, but not too far from the main road. I arrived around 8 p.m. The air was getting chilly, and the sky was completely dark. I went straight in, turned on the living room lights, and looked around. The house was tidy, with simple decor, minimalist furniture, and soft, comfortable lighting. I checked each room, made sure the back door was locked, then dropped my bag in the bedroom. After showering and relaxing for a bit, I started feeling sleepy. Around 10 p.m., I turned off most of the lights, leaving only a small one on in the kitchen. I lay in bed, scrolling on my phone for a while before trying to fall asleep. But just as I was about to drift off, I heard footsteps on the front porch. At first, I thought it was just the wind or maybe a stray cat passing by, but a few seconds later, I heard it again, followed by a knock at the door. The knock wasn't very loud, but it was clear. I instantly snapped awake, my drowsiness gone. There was no reason for anyone to be here this late. I hadn't told anyone where I was staying, and I didn't know a single soul in this city. I stayed completely still, hoping whoever was outside would just leave. But after a while, the knocking came again, this time louder and more urgent. My heart started pounding. I slowly got out of bed and carefully walked toward the living room. Holding my breath, I peeked through the peephole. A man was standing there. He wore a dark jacket and a hat, and I couldn't see his face clearly due to the dim porch light. Then he spoke. His voice was deep and quiet. "Excuse me," he said, "is this the Airbnb rental? I was given this address and told to stay here." I paused. That didn't make sense. I was the only guest who had booked this house, and the owner hadn't mentioned anything about someone else coming. I took a breath and replied carefully, "I've rented this place. Maybe you've got the wrong address?" The man didn't respond right away. He just stood there for a few seconds, like he was thinking something over. Then, with a more insistent tone, he said, "Oh, maybe I'm mistaken, but could you open the door for a second? I just want to be sure." There was something in his voice that sent chills down my spine. "No," I answered firmly. "You can contact the homeowner to double-check." I could see his jaw clench. Then he slowly stepped back before finally turning around and walking away. I stayed by the door for several more minutes, listening carefully. The silence returned. I sighed in relief, thinking maybe he really had the wrong address. But an hour later, that calm was shattered. I heard something outside the side window, a soft noise like footsteps in the grass. I held my breath and glanced toward the window. I could hardly believe what I saw. The man was back. He was standing outside, peeking into the house through a gap in the curtain. My hand immediately reached for my phone. With trembling fingers, I called 911. I whispered to the operator, explaining that a suspicious man was outside the Airbnb I was renting and seemed to be trying to get in. The operator said police were being dispatched to the location. I stayed quiet, crouched down on the floor to stay out of view from the window, while the sound of footsteps slowly faded again. About 10 minutes later, I saw the flashing lights of a police car down the street. I felt a bit safer. When the officers arrived, I carefully opened the door and told them everything that had happened. They searched the area around the house, but the man had disappeared into the night. All they found were footprints near the window and front porch. I couldn't sleep at all that night. Every little sound in the house made me more alert. The next morning, I checked out early and reported the incident to the homeowner and Airbnb. The owner was shocked and said nothing like that had ever happened at the property before. I never found out who that man was or what he really wanted. But one thing's for sure, I'm so glad I didn't open the door that night. This incident happened in the early 2010s when I was on a business trip to a small town outside Seattle. Wanting to save costs and enjoy a more comfortable atmosphere than a regular hotel, I decided to rent an Airbnb for 3 nights. It was a small house located in a suburban area, quite far from the city center, but it looked cozy and had many positive reviews. I arrived there around 8 p.m. The owner, a middle-aged man named Greg, had left the key in a small combination lockbox near the front door, just as he had instructed through a message. Upon entering, I found the house clean and well organized. There was a faint aroma of coffee, as if someone had just made a fresh brew. It felt a bit strange because no one was supposed to be there. My first night there went smoothly. I was exhausted after the long journey and went straight to sleep. However, around 3 in the morning, I woke up to a strange sound, faint footsteps coming from downstairs. I stayed still, trying to listen carefully, but after a few minutes, the sound disappeared. I reassured myself that it was just the house settling due to temperature changes. The next day, I sent a message to Greg asking if anyone else had access to the house. He quickly replied, assuring me that no one else was staying there and that I was the only guest. I brushed off my unease and went about my day as usual. That night, however, things felt even stranger. Around midnight, I heard the bathroom door slowly creak open. I was sure I had closed it before going to bed. Cautiously, I got out of bed and checked the bathroom, but there was nothing unusual. I went back to my room and tried to sleep. At around 4 in the morning, I woke up again. This time, I heard something even more disturbing, a heavy breathing sound just outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, straining my ears. The sound lasted only a few seconds before disappearing. I didn't dare open the door and just lay there motionless until dawn. When morning came, I felt an overwhelming sense that something was terribly wrong. I decided to leave earlier than planned. Before leaving, I checked every room to make sure I hadn't left anything behind. When I opened the closet in the master bedroom, I found something that made my blood run cold. Inside was a small mattress and a blanket that looked like they had been recently used. I grabbed my belongings and rushed out of the house as quickly as possible. As I drove away, I sent Greg a message asking if anyone else had been staying in the house, but I never received a reply. A few days later, I came across a news article that sent chills down my spine. The police had just arrested a homeless man who was known for secretly hiding in empty homes and unsecured Airbnbs. He would stay in the house unnoticed, watch the guests, and sometimes steal from them while they slept. I never found out if he had actually been there during my stay. But ever since that incident, I've made sure that every Airbnb I book has proper security, and I never stay in a house that's too isolated again.